I'm here today with Dr. Melissa Sophia Joy. She is the founder of Somatic Awakening, an internationally known spiritual teacher, author, oracle, and naturopathic doctor specializing in mind, body, spirit healing. She's also the founding director of Sophia Healing Academy, a mystery school devoted to transformative healing and spiritual awakening, a divine feminine wisdom keeper, star seed, and multidimensional channel. She receives guidance from the higher realms to facilitate profound shifts and conscious evolution. As a guardian of somatic awakening, an ancient healing and spiritual path based in the Magdalene Christos Sophia lineage, she merges the law of love and the law of one with somatic healing, higher consciousness, and direct connection with the divine, leading individuals into profound healing, awakening, and embodiment of their divine essence. Beautiful. Thank you for being here.
I'm so delighted to be here with you today, Meredith. I've been so looking forward to this conversation.
Yeah. Well, there's much to ask, and maybe we could just start with how you found your spiritual path, and then maybe we can get into how you found Magdalene.
Wow. Well, it's quite a big story, so I'll try
Yeah.
to make it very concise. So I've always been a spiritual person. I was raised in the South, was actually brought up in the Southern Baptist tradition. So even though early on it was there were aspects that were very difficult, I could feel the Holy Spirit. I could feel Jesus's love. I knew that it was real. And then from there, lots of things have evolved. I moved away from traditional Christianity when I took an Old Testament class in college, and I was like, whoa, there must be something else out there besides, there's a lot of, difficult, violent stories in the Old Testament. So I've been on a path of many different spiritualities. I was pagan for a while. I studied with medicine, men and women of the Native American tradition. I was a yoga teacher, really, really, really into the yogic path. I also dove into Buddhism. And then what happened is that there's a few different stories, but the biggest story that really called me to the mystical lineage of Yeshua and Magdalene and Sophia is that I was awakened in the middle of the night many years ago with a vision, and it was Yeshua and Magdalene, and it totally changed my life on so many levels. And in that vision, they told me that it was time to remember why I came here, to remember who I am, and then to share that with other people. And the vision came in the middle of a very long, dark night of the soul experience. And I was about halfway through that experience, and I had gone through a lot of traumatic memories from this life and past lives, and was really struggling with how to actually heal them. And as a naturopathic doctor who specializes in mind, body, spirit medicine, you can imagine, like, I know a lot of healing modalities, but none of them were really getting to the deep core of transformation that I was looking for. So one of the things they told me in that vision is that it was time to go on a deep initiatory experience. They gave me some guidance along those lines. And one of the primary things was to go back to my meditation practice, to spend long periods every day in meditation. So, when Yeshua and Magdalene show up at your door, you pay attention. And so I absolutely dove deep into my meditation practice again. And within a few days, Magdalene showed up in my inner realm and started teaching me how to heal myself from what is now called somatic awakening. So I say I'm a founder, but I'm not really the founder. I'm just the rememberer or the conduit of this path that what I've been told actually is an ancient path of early, we can't even really call it Christianity. We'll call it the Christ movement before Rome got involved. we can talk more about that later. But the primary thing is that I experienced incredible deep healing. And it was just a natural next step to extend that out to my patients. They started getting better much quicker than anything I'd ever done before. And then I started teaching it. And so I've been on this deep path, not only of somatic awakening, but also really connecting to Yeshua and Magdalene and Sophia and the entire Christ consciousness. Those who are connected to the Christ consciousness, the law of love, as my mentors and teachers. And I'm so deeply, at such a deep, heartfelt, soul-felt level, honored to be a conduit of this love.
Wow, I'm curious if you could share a little more. Was it mostly traumatic memories that were healed for you? Did you also have body ailments at that time that healed? And then I'm curious to learn more about somatic awakening, but yeah, tell me more.
Well, I love that question. I don't think anyone has ever actually asked me that question. So I need to go back just a little ways. So I've always been a mystic, even whenever I was in the South, and I just didn't know what to do with it. So I just kind of hid it away. But at this time during my life, I think it really started around 1999. I started having a lot of past life memories. Most of them were very traumatic, thousands of years at this point. At first, it was just a lot of really traumatic memories all at once. It was very overwhelming. And so what would happen is that I would have these memories, and then I would go into a lot of anxiety. It was a lot of terror, because for sure, as part of those memories, there were many different times that I was, in the burning times, or I was a martyr, or, some way in which I was killed in some really violent death. And so that was coming into my present day experience. And so, yeah, I was having a lot of, emotional experiences. But also, one of the primary things that happened for me is that I had this tightness at different places in my body, especially my solar plexus. And that could cause many different symptoms. I'm a very sensitive person. I'm a person that's very aligned to mind body connection. So absolutely, I was having physical illnesses as well, very intense insomnia, very intense the other little things, sometimes not so little, heart palpitations, as well as I had a history of eczema. Every time I would go into this trauma spiral, my eczema would get much worse. Allergies would get much worse. Everything would get much worse. So as I was healing more and more, it was like the intense fire of the trauma was transformed. So imagine like all of this trauma creating this bonfire. And every time I would go through some transformative experience, it got smaller and smaller and smaller. Meanwhile, at the same time, I was actually stepping more and more into my higher self consciousness. So in order to understand this, I'll go a little bit into somatic awakening and what actually it is. So the first thing that Magdalene showed me was that our higher self has multiple levels to it. Very commonly, she used a metaphor of the mansion, right? So we have a mansion that has many frequencies of higher self. So she started by showing me the frequency of our higher self at a higher level of our energy body, at our eighth chakra, also known as our soul star chakra. And in this frequency level, she allowed me and helped me to connect even more to a specific aspect of our higher self that I now call higher self witness consciousness, that is very similar to the witness consciousness, used in mindfulness communities. However, it's from our higher self. So it's not just neutral. It has the ability to connect to the wisdom, the compassion, the love, whatever is needed from our higher self. And as we connect more and more to our higher self, we realize that there is an aspect of our higher self that is in complete unified consciousness with the divine. So in essence, we begin by utilizing the higher self witness consciousness and bringing that down into the places that most need our love and attention. And so for me, for the first few years, that was my solar plexus that had layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of trauma there. And what would happen is that the higher self-witness consciousness has the ability to come into a very powerful relationship with whatever is there. And as what is there starts to trust that what is actually happening is way beyond a visualization, but actual relationship with our higher self and ultimately the divine, then it opens up in its deepest places where it needs healing. And as it says, yes, the divine wants nothing more than to make contact with that deep, deep place that believes it's unworthy or believes it's in terror or believes whatever it believes that's holding us back. And so what happens is that there's this transformation, literal dissolving of the energy and the emotion that's held within that somatic contraction. And so there's a lot more peace and freedom that comes on. So that's the first layer of somatic awakening. The second layer is that as you have more and more of these experiences, and you get this imprint of not just believing from a mental level, but knowing through experience the divine is real. The divine is coming through this conduit of divinity and making contact. And as the shadow within your psyche and the somatic contractions dissolve more and more, there's more space for your higher self to embody in your being. It's an incredible feeling, experience, intuited experience that happens within the body. And so embodiment becomes much more than a word. It actually is a lived experience where you are embodying your higher self and embodying, in essence, the divinity. So at the most advanced path, what we're doing is that we're utilizing the Rose Grail mysteries of bringing the dualities together, bringing the light and the dark together, bringing the human and the divine together. And there we open more and more into the embodied Christ consciousness.
I imagine she learned this from Yeshua. Do you know?
My sense of it is that there are ways in which Yeshua taught her an incredible amount. And you can connect into that not only through her gospel, a lot of her gospel is missing, unfortunately. However, there's been a new gospel discovered called the Beloved Companion that comes out of the Cathar tradition. And just from getting a connection to that, there is so much that she learned from Yeshua. And my sense of it is that she took these teachings and then embodied them in her own experience because she lived for many years after he passed. And my sense of it is that they were continuing to communicate, right? She was in this elevated state. He could come and go in his light body. So did she learn it from him? My intuitive sense is yes. And then she also took it and embodied it even more and then taught it to the early Christ followers, especially in the France and Italy regions where a lot of her teachings really flourished.
Yeah, amazing. So when you're working with a client, are you doing hands-on work? Do you also, it sounds like you teach people how to do this themselves. What does it look like?
Yeah. So, my practice has many different aspects to it. I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I also do other modalities, and I'm a channel and all these different things. So sometimes whenever I'm working with people, there is a hands-on aspect to that. But somatic awakening specifically, it doesn't have to be hands-on. Most of the time it's not. So somatic awakening has, from this original connection with Magdalene, I have taken it and in communication with her, I've taken it and really evolved it for today's world. So let me back up a little bit so you can fully understand it. So somatic awakening now has three aspects. So the practice, which is what I was just talking about, connecting to our higher self-witness consciousness, is the primary focus of what somatic awakening is. However, what I discovered is that sometimes people show up in my practice and they're in a swirl. they just had an argument with their partner, or some big trigger is on board connected to some abuse in the past, right? And their ego mind is swirling. So first we help calm the ego mind and help stabilize it through what I call Gestalt somatic awakening. It's very similar to a lot of voice dialogue or internal family systems. It's a form of that, just to help stabilize so we can understand the story and bring in higher consciousness, just to bring some stability. That then allows us to go into the practice, which is ultimately me helping facilitate them to get really grounded, to get in their higher self witness consciousness, and then to bring that down in their body. And then at that point, their higher consciousness and whatever the emotion and energy of the somatic contraction and what it wants to say that its experience is leading, and I'm just facilitating. But in essence, it's a lot of being in relationship with all the landscape of the psyche and the somatic body. So as you can imagine, this is a path and this is a practice. So whenever I'm working with a person one-on-one, this is a time for us to go really deep, especially into the places that a person may not feel safe enough to go whenever they're in their own practice, or sometimes people are brand new to this. So very often when I'm working with people one-on-one, we go really deep. However, there's also what I'd call the third level of somatic awakening. This is quantum somatic awakening. And this is for people who really utilize this practice at the level now that they are having awakening experience, they're having embodiment experiences, and we're opening to the higher quantum field of what's possible when we're living in this I am consciousness, when we're living in this higher vibration. So a lot of times I'll work with people one-on-one with that, but very often I'm also working with people who are part of my longer programs. I have 3 different 7-month programs that people can go through to immerse themselves in somatic awakening, learn how to be a practitioner. And then I'm actually just starting in a couple of weeks a new quantum somatic awakening program. The first realm is going to be for alumni. So I'm really excited about that, to dive in even deeper. So in essence, when a person is working with me, there's many different, just to kind of wrap that up, there's many different ways that can look. But the primary thing is we meet them where they're at and then take them deeper in alignment with their higher self and the divine.
It's beautiful. Yeah, I just think of the miracle healings that they were doing in their lifetime, and like merging with that higher self, God consciousness, and letting that run through their body to heal. Maybe we could give people just a little context. I do have a lot of info on Mary Magdalene on my podcast, but in case someone is like, this is all new to me, what is this? Would you give a little background on like Mary Magdalene, what she means to you?
Mm,
Um,
mm-hmm.
what her role was in Yeshua's mission, all of that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd love to. So there are things that we know that have been written down, and then there are what I'd call the traditions, the lineages, the perspective that people hold. So what we know is in the Gospel of Philip. We'll just start with that. She is called his koinonos, meaning his partner. This could be spiritual partner. It could also be marital partner. She was the one who was closest to him. And you can read this in many of the Gospels. In the Gospel of Philip, it also states that that Jesus often kissed her like on the mouth. So just from that, during that time period, that was not allowed unless people were married, right? He was also a rabbi. It was really unusual for a rabbi not to be married. We can go back and look at history. It actually would be against the grain for a rabbi to not be married. So
Mm-hmm.
from all of this, and from what I have been shown, and also from what I intuit, they were together. They were a married couple. And their union was totally beyond this space and time. They were absolute twin flames. They came in together. They opened the doors together. My sense is that Yeshua absolutely was the highest level of master, and Magdalene was an embodiment of Sophia. And also, the other thing that I have been told and have also read, and I feel really, really, really strongly about this on an intuitive level, is that she was a priestess of Isis and learned the deepest levels of sexual mastery in order to bring and beyond sexual mastery, like the high vibrational mastery, but part of that was sexuality, and brought that into their experience together and hold the bass note for him, not only in his teachings, but also through his death and through his ascension process and resurrection process. So, as we know from looking at history, Mother Mary was, lifted up in almost this, it's really difficult to touch Mother Mary as a human because she was lifted up as a divine incarnation of the Virgin, right? And Mary Magdalene was, I forget the exact century, I think it was the 6th century, was then lied about, actually slandered, saying that she was a penitent prostitute. However, we know now from so many levels, but also from the fact that the Roman Catholic Church in 1969 rescinded the belief that they portrayed that she was a penitent prostitute and said that that was not her, and now recently has been elevated to the apostle to the apostles. So she in and of herself is a master, and more people, especially women, are connecting to not only her lineage on a mental level, but her lineage on a spiritual level, because she is reawakening humanity in her own right, especially the divine feminine aspect of Christ consciousness.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful description of it all. Yeah.
Thank you.
I just learned that in ancient Egypt, a pharaoh could not rule, could not be a king unless he was anointed by one of the priestesses of the royal lineage. Like a king could not be a king without the priestess, without this matrilineal royal bloodline, like that they needed um, the wife, the counterpart, the one to anoint. And yeah, I'd have chills as I share about it because I know Mary Magdalene was very connected to Egypt. And even, when I was just looking at a map yesterday, like Galilee is not that far from Egypt.
Right.
And yeah, that she played such a role in Yeshua's life that I don't think he would have been able to do everything that he did in his life unless he was the anointed one, blessed by the feminine, the counterpart.
I
So,
totally agree. Yeah. My sense is that her, Mary Magdalene, and Mother Mary were the rocks behind Jesus, right? Without
yeah,
them, I mean, of course, Mother Mary was his mother, but even on a spiritual level, without them, both behind them, my sense is it would have been very, very difficult for him to do what he did.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, all the women.
Women.
So
Yes.
erased from history, but yeah, we're bringing it back. There's awakening. So many women are
Yeah.
awakening to this.
Yes. So
Oh,
beautiful.
yeah, I'd love to hear. What did I wanted to ask you about? Oh, the energy of the rose. So, I know that the rose is very connected to Mary Magdalene. And could you tell us a little more about the rose, the lineage, why it's connected to them, anything
Mm-hmm.
on what it means to be a rose priestess?
Mm-hmm. I would love to. The last few years, that lineage has really reawakened inside of me. Prior to that, I was so busy healing and teaching and all these things. People would be offering these rose things. And I'm like, well, I don't really know that much about the rose. And all of a sudden, I had enough memories of past lives, which is, yes, you do. Here it is. Ding. Oh, wow. Okay. So, my sense is that everyone has their own unique understanding of what the rose lineage is. So I will give you my reflection of what has awoken inside of me. And so the primary essence of the rose lineage is love. It's surrendering, first, opening, connecting to the law of love in its highest frequency as a woman, and as a man as well, but especially as a woman, and allowing love to teach you, allowing yourself to be an embodiment and a conduit of love in every level that you possibly can to the best of your ability. Now, the lineage, it goes back so far. Absolutely is connected to Avalon. Absolutely is connected to Mother Mary and Mary Magdalene and the women who taught from their teachings and Yeshua's teachings, because there was a whole huge amount of women who taught not only in the Christ following prior to Rome getting involved, but also as the Cathars. So that if you don't know that word, these are the people who continued on this lineage of love, really, after the fact. And this was in France and Italy primarily. But even before then, in Egypt, the priestesses who were really channeling this law of love. And I even was shown that it goes all the way back to Lemuria and prior to this planet. So especially Lemuria, the priestess of Lemuria, they were, I would say, the founders of the Rose Path. And also in Atlantis, my memories of Atlantis were different. I haven't remembered specifically being a priestess of this lineage. However, my sense of it is that there were absolutely priestesses of the Rose at that time as well.
Oh, beautiful. Yeah, I hadn't heard that piece about Lemuria.
I hadn't either, but they told me. I have remembered many lifetimes as a Lemurian. They're talking to me all the time these days. And then whenever I asked the question, it went all the way back to them, and they started telling me all sorts of different things. They were, in essence, they were living in Eden, beyond time and space, and this unified consciousness of love. And that was one of the places where that was really born on this planet. Or integrated, I think that would be a better word.
Yeah. And I think too, a big thing is in some ways it can't be described with words, but I know I've spoken to many women when they hear about it, something inside of them is just like I know that.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. There's a lot of that happens before our mind gets engaged. I was the same way.
Yeah.
Even years before I had the vision of Yeshua and Magdalene coming to me, I had gotten other smaller visions. And one of them was, you were the lineage of Magdalene. And at the time, I didn't even know who Magdalene was. I was like, I know I am. I know I am. What does that mean? My mind was trying to catch up with it, but my heart was just overflowing with a yes.
Yes. I felt similarly. Have you always been an open channel, like talking to your past lives and the other beings on the other side? Or how did that come to be in your world?
As I mentioned, as a child, I was always intuitive, but because I was raised in the South and there was lots of fear, I really suppressed it. But my sense of it is that my intuition got reactivated, and it was actually through the yogic path. I spent a summer at Ananda in Nevada City, learning how to be a yoga teacher, did a lot of meditation, and I actually had my first awakening experience with Divine Mother. And as a person, again, raised in the South, I didn't even know anything about Divine Mother, but she came to me, and I experience living as a unification with her for a few days. And that totally changed my life. And I knew much more was possible. So at that point, well, I went to naturopathic medical school, was not really focused on my intuition then. But after I got out, I knew I wanted to incorporate intuition into my practice. So I focused more on awakening those channels, went to this place in Sausalito, California called Academy of Intuition Medicine, and received a certification of being a master's of intuition medicine. And I started teaching there. And from that experience, my intuition started getting on board. The engine was fully going, so to speak. And from that place, I started having more connections with my past lives and then with other beings, literally out of pure necessity, because I had so many past lives coming on board. I'm like, what is going on? And I would be working with these, energy healers or psychotherapists, and they had no idea what to do with me. So I literally had to reach out for mentorship from these higher beings, and they came in droves. So I was super, super grateful. I also really connected with Kaya Ra's work, the Sophia Code, and that even before then I was already connecting in, but that really helped me really attune even on a higher level with many, many guides, many masters.
And do you actually hear them, or does it just kind of drop in as a knowing?
Yes and yes.
Yeah.
Intuition has many different ways that it comes in, through knowing, through hearing, through seeing. Sometimes I smell things. Like I have often smelled roses around me, and okay, who's here? Right. And then I drop in deeper. Very often these days, it comes in through meditation. Like I'll have a question. The big thing that I'm going through right now, I'm getting ready to go through my second Saturn return. It's already happening. And I'm being asked to no longer lead from my linear mind and my ego at all. So I have all these questions for Divine Mother and Magdalene. Should I go this way? Should I go that way? What do you want me to do? How do you want me to do this? Because my linear mind and my ego are terrible managers. So they're not leading anymore. So I'm constantly in meditation, asking questions and surrendering and opening. And, my biggest prayer is to be an embodiment of love. And so they really help me. And so when you have a desire, when you have a need and you trust, they're going to be there. Even if you can't hear them, you can feel them. And very often the divine speaks through emotion more than words. So I really want to convey to anyone listening to this, everyone is intuitive. The more that you need support and you trust it and you ask for it, the more you can receive it. And most people receive it through feeling, like support or love or being broken open by this next level of your higher consciousness or whatever it is for you.
And I'm just thinking about all the people you've probably worked with at this point. Is there anyone that stands out in your mind of when you taught Somatic Awakening, just anything you would want to share about changes you saw in people or miracles that came
Yeah,
to
yeah,
be?
absolutely. Well, my sense of it is that, first of all, I just want to say that what we're doing with Somatic Awakening is that we're tending the garden of your being through divine intervention. And that divine intervention comes in when we say yes to it, because we're living in free will, right? So very often people have a lot of no's in their subconscious and their unconscious because of protection. We close down. And so as people start to unwind and trust this experience, then what happens again and again are miracles. And I've seen so many, 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 everything from, chronic digestive complaints that are so intense that it takes a person to the ER like every other week, that were caused primarily from trauma as a child, as the divine started moving in deeper and deeper and deeper, no longer having those complaints. I also have seen people with very, very, very severe anxiety disorder, panic attacks, depression, very severe other diseases, especially autoimmunity diseases such as Crohn's disease or swelling hives, Lyme's disease. I've seen people have incredible experiences that they're so powerful that they go into healing crisis because there's so many pathogens that are dying. And so I have to help them with that. I'm like, okay, take these binders and call me if your fever increases. And then, 2 days later, they feel better than they've ever felt because all of these pathogens are clearing from their body. So, it really varies at person to person regarding how much ability we have to connect with the core of why we're ill and say yes, not just intellectually, but the parts that are traumatized, and very often these parts are so traumatized, they have protective walls and barriers, or they don't trust, or where have you been, all these different things. So we have to work with that. And as soon as that starts softening and they can receive, again, that's when the miracles happen. So it's incredible.
Yeah.
I feel so blessed and grateful to do what I do.
Yeah. I completely agree that our ailments, like in our body, that are linked to trauma, whether we're conscious of it or not, whether it was at this lifetime or another one, there's something in there. Yeah. The emotional body, like that can heal so much when we find a resolution.
Absolutely. And usually, as a naturopathic doctor, I will say we do need to treat the physical, right? Especially with herbs and the right diet and supplements and all of the good lifestyle things. But if we just do that, then we're falling short. And, the first few years of my practice, I was just doing naturopathic medicine, and it's incredible. It's an incredible medicine. But when I started incorporating the mind body and the intuitive and looking at things from a real holistic perspective, not just a physical, the emotional, mental, spiritual, that's when people started getting so much better, so much faster.
So good.
Mm-hmm.
So I know we're both very connected to France. I had my first pilgrimage there last April. Um, so I guess background for people listening. After the crucifixion, Mary Magdalene was on a boat. I've heard different stories that she was pushed off on the boat with no oars. I've heard the stories that it was more planned and intentional, but she made her way to southern France. And there are some beautiful churches there and caves. And continued the ministry. Like she was the one to carry on the teachings of Jesus and original Christianity. And yeah, I'd love to hear just anything you want to share about your connection to southern France. What has that been like for you when you went? I think you've been there many times at this point. So anything you want to share on that?
Well, thank you for that question. And I have to say, I also want to hear more from you, whatever you want to share. So the have only actually been there once, but I was there for several weeks. And it was actually toward the end of this initiatory experience that I talked about, where, I had this vision. And then a couple of years later, I went to France and definitely was still in a very significant initiation. And for me, it was like plugging into an electrical outlet that was so potent. Every day, some big thing was going on. And I was with a group of 3 other deep, deep, deep practitioners, other people who were also channeled and teachers themselves. And, and probably the most significant thing that happened for me there is when I went to Saint Marie de la Mar. And Sainte Marie de la Mar is this little village that is on the coast, that it is said that this is where Mary Magdalene and Mary of Salome and other Mary, I forget her last name. Or
Jacob or Jacoby or
yes,
yeah.
yes. Thank you. And so there is a chapel there, and it is so incredibly potent. So you walk into this chapel, and there are all of these paintings. I don't even know how many paintings. There's a lot of paintings of these experiences over hundreds and hundreds of years of these saints, including Mary Magdalene, having these, helping these people with these miraculous experiences. And so the place is potent and alive with the divine feminine Christ consciousness specifically. So when I was there, I went up to the upper chapel and I meditated for a really long time, probably a couple of hours, something like that. And in that experience, I not only connected with Sophia as Holy Spirit and got a lot of information from her regarding who she is and connecting more to Sophia and, you know, taking steps in that embodiment process, but also connecting directly with Yeshua and Mary Magdalene. That day, the focus of the teaching and the awakening experience literally was what the power of the word actually means. And it felt like they imprinted upon me this, I'll just use a metaphor because it's really hard to describe this. I would imagine this book that is all about the power of the word and all the different levels of evolution of what happens with the power of the word as we evolve more and more into our awakening experiences. So as you can imagine, I'm still learning from this book. This is something that I'm going to be learning probably for lifetimes, because at the most highest level of the power of the word is the miracles. You embody the divine so potently, so powerfully, that you can call miracles forth. However, what I did from that is actually, I can't say I did anything, but what I learned from that is a very powerful prayer that I actually teach my students now, called Power of the Word Decree. The essence of it is this, the take home is this, that when we bring our higher consciousness and we align it to our will, and our will has the ability to surrender. So in essence, it's utilizing our humanity and our divinity. And we call forth the highest good and know that it is so. It is so. We call that forth. So that's a part of the teachings in quantum somatic awakening. But going back to France, there are many, many different aspects, many things that I experienced. I think the other, I'll just be really quickly, other big thing that I experienced was going to Montségur, which is just a little background. I had mentioned the Cathars before. The Cathars had a really, really powerful stronghold in France, and they were living literally the teachings of Yeshua, but also the teachings of Mary Magdalene. And so not only could men be perfects, that's what they're called, or parfaits, but also the leaders, but also women as an example. And there are other things, it was a lot about the law of love, connecting into that. However, the Roman Catholics did not like this, and they started calling them heretics. And then what ended up happening is that there was the first genocide on European soil from the Roman Catholics and the French government killing the Cathars. So Montségur was their last stronghold. And it was one of those experiences that totally broke me open, because I do remember being a Cathar, and I remember being a Montségur, and I remember so many things. And I had already had some memories, but as I was walking up the hill, I could not stop crying.
Mm-hmm.
It was like tears for all day long. And the next 2 days, just feeling in awe of what happened, both in the sense of what happened, but also, and this is the most powerful part of it, also the vibration that the leaders were holding. So after Montségur is this big stronghold, and after I climbed down, we went into what's called the burning fields, where they had this huge bonfire where the leaders basically were taken to at the very end, where they were killed. And during this time, I was with a dear friend, Mercedes Kirkle. Some of you may know her. And her and I went into ritual, and I started connecting with those who passed, and I was praying for them, and they lifted me up and they said, "Oh, no, 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 no. We knew what was happening. We knew where we're going. Let us show you." And they opened up this huge field of love and this huge field of where we're going after death. And all of a sudden, like, any fears that I had of death just dissolved, because they
Mm,
opened up this power of what is true. So
mm,
I'm getting goosebumps just telling that story. But that was also incredibly life changing.
mm-hmm. It's so powerful. Yeah. I am just thinking about the crucifixion as well, and Yeshua's knowing of like already being in that higher consciousness, so connected to God that I'm sure the human self there was fear, but the higher self, the knowing, the already being so connected to God and in the bliss place that it was like, all right, just going in head first into this,
Yeah.
and so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And how he showed us in that experience that, yes, he's divine and he's also human, right? He has some big
Yeah.
feelings going in, right?
Yeah.
And yet he was taken up. Usually
Yeah.
it takes a long time for a person who's crucified to die, but it didn't take that long.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I'll share this small story that I think I shared with you, but for the people listening, that so I went to southern France with my husband and my daughter. It's kind of the only way we could do it at this stage. She's 3 years old, and I knew I couldn't go away for like one of these 10-day trips on my own. At some point, I will, but um, and how beautiful to like bring her to these sacred sites when she grows up. If she at all feels connected to the priestess energy, I'll be like, you went on your first pilgrimage when you were 3.
That's right. How beautiful.
Um, but there's a hike leading up to the cave, the grotto, that is said to be where Mary Magdalene lived out the last 30 years of her life, and prayer and meditation and being lifted up by angels, and their beautiful a spring leading up on that path, which we blessed each other with. But I had like a backpack and was carrying my daughter for a good part of the hike up. And just that morning, I had been in prayer about some of my own just challenges and human things that I'm working on, and hoping, having heard that, oh, people have miracles here where things really change in their lives, and, really wanting to be in that prayer. And as there was a man walking down and we were walking up, and he said something to us in French, and we're like, do you speak English or Spanish? Because we know very little French. And he said Spanish, yes. And he said, he pointed to me and he said something like, uh, ella lleva su cargamento, or something in Spanish, which was like, why is she carrying the heavy load? But, and my husband just had on a backpack. Um, but the way the translation was, it's the same thing. Load and burden are the same word in Spanish. And the way my husband said it to me after he passed was he asked, um, she's choosing to carry the heavier load. And as I'm walking up and carrying this heavy load, my daughter, but we know I chose it. I was happy to do it. Yeah. Oh, the words that he had said was like, she carries her burden willingly.
Oh,
And that was what I was holding and walking up to the cave with, and thinking of Yeshua, thinking of Mother Mary, thinking of Mary Magdalene, this heavy load that they carried, that they knew that they were here to do and walking into. And um, to do that with willingness, like truly to offer up your will to divine will. And that was just so impactful, thinking about my own life challenges that, all right, can I let go of the victimhood fully? Can I face my challenges head on? Can I carry the burdens willingly, knowing that this is why we're here, to grow, to evolve, to face the hardship, and to evolve beyond it. And, as we grow spiritually, I imagine there will always still be human things that we're tending to, whether it's pain in our body or um, mold in the house or whatever it is. And can we just continue to show up to it with it, openness and love in our hearts? And yes, I can do this. And that comes through a lot for me with motherhood too, because it's just like, yes, I will clean up the food on the floor and the throw up or the pee or this extra load of laundry or whatever it is. And I do it willingly.
Mm-hmm. That's
Yeah.
such a beautiful story. Thank you so much for sharing that. It
Yeah.
touches me so deeply because, as we go into our spiritual practice more and more, we are asked more and more, if we're saying yes fully to it, to surrender our will to thy will. And it's hard when we have victim consciousness running and all the different voices connected to victim consciousness, or the anxiety connected to it, or the collapse connected to it. And, I think for me and those who are resonant with this path, somatic awakening is a way that allows us to not only soften, but to allow those difficult parts to come back home to love. So it's easier. So it just makes it easier. Because, as you were talking, one of the things that I was thinking of is, yeah, absolutely. I mean, Yeshua and Mary Magdalene, Mother Mary, carried a huge load. But also after they died, there was an incredible genocide that happened to the early Christ followers. They were asked, in essence, to give their life, not only their will, but their life very often. I mean, it was just incredible, not incredible in a positive way, but incredible. And like, it was really hard to be an early Christ follower. And so what I've been shown is that this path, especially the practice that I was talking about, that it was an early Christ practice. It was called the abiding of the Holy Spirit. And it helped people not just think about their connection, but to live their connection, especially in the parts of them that may be really afraid to be a Christ follower. I know I would have been. Can you imagine these days being a Christ follower and knowing that your life might be on the line? I mean, we're being asked to step into, awakening and ascension, which is scary, but it's a big, big thing. So I just feel so grateful that there are ways in which we can bring in the divine into our lived experience on a feeling level, so that our shadow, our psyche, our ego can settle, so that we can say yes.
Yeah.
Yes, thy will, not my will.
Yes.
For ease and grace.
Yeah. And this brings up something I was thinking at the beginning when you were sharing that um, I want to acknowledge you for having all the awareness of past lives and persecution and continuing to show up the way you are in your work and like growing the audience and all the things, because I imagine the fear is there, the fear of attack. I feel it sometimes. It's just like, whew, to be a spiritual leader is very vulnerable.
It is. And I've had to work that one for decades. Like
Yeah.
literally, I can't tell you how many times I've shown up to, a therapist office or a healer just in tears, being in fear because I have a launch coming up and I don't want to do it. Oh,
Yeah.
no, let me rephrase that. My ego contraction victim part, still in terror, didn't want to do it. Fortunately, that's been several years since that's happened because I've worked it so hard.
Yeah.
And, you know, it just feels so, it feels like now that I've done a huge amount of healing, that it's like I could ignore this call. We always have free will. I could ignore
Yeah.
the call. And my sense of it is that the guides, the mentors, the masters have really cocooned me at times and offered me what I need to realize more and more and more that this life is just what this life is. This is, we could call it a dream. And after we die, we're going home, whatever that means, right? But it's this, we're moving into a whole other unified consciousness. So how how can I be a role in helping us step more into bringing that unified consciousness, that love frequency down in 3D reality? Because it's needed. And I think my soul mission is so big that it has just pushed me and pushed me and pushed me to do the healing that I needed to do, to go, okay, I surrender. I'll show up. I'll be, you know, my cog in the wheel and do what I'm here to do.
Yeah.
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 And I can imagine you can relate,
Yes.
sister,
Of
priestess, teacher.
course. Yeah. It's been a journey. That was, I think, one of my initial initiations was showing up in the willingness to be seen fully
Yeah. It's
and
a
find
big,
my voice.
it's a big
Yeah.
query.
Do you have any last thoughts around or any wisdom to share with someone else who might be facing that challenge? The fear of persecution, the fear of like
Oh,
letting myself be seen.
yeah. Yeah. Well, the first thing I just want to say is that it's a path. So there's no need to push or force yourself or judge yourself to do anything other than where you're at, but
Mm.
also to feel and to notice, is there a soul mission that you're denying? And so allowing the soul mission to also have its way with you and with as much ease and grace as possible, in the sense of allowing that drive, that awareness to lead you to that next step, to lead you to whether it's, you know, the healer that's going to really make the difference, or the initiation that's going to, you know, call you into deep transformation, or whatever that is, that retreat or that, you know, meditation process practice. Because as we go deeper and deeper and allow our soul mission to be what it is, it's going to lead. It's going to allow us to step more and more into standing and speaking, even if our voice shakes. And showing up doesn't mean perfection. It means showing up where you're at and doing the best job that you can do. And then if you show up and then you have a backlash, which very often happens for the first few years,
Yeah.
or even have a freak out prior to showing up, whatever that is, it can happen before or after or both, right? To be super kind to yourself, to allow yourself to be held by spirit, and to be held by your sisters, to be held by your healer or therapist or whoever you're working with, to be held also by the guides, the masters, because they are here to support us in this evolution. There's no way that we can do it without them. There's no way. And when we open and surrender to that, especially connecting also to our higher self, then we are carried across the river of the fear or the terror or whatever is arising, saying, don't do it. Because the power, the love, the frequency, the attunement, the connection that we feel as we show up more and more, it trumps. I don't know if I could use that word anymore, but I'll just use it. It trumps all the things that hold us back.
Yes. Yeah. Sisterhood, spirit, the guides. We're not alone. We can take baby steps. We can go slow at our own pace.
That's right. That's right. One of the things I say to my students and patients a lot is ease and grace, right and perfect timing, aligned with your highest good. I I don't know. I don't know if anyone's an astrology geek out there, but I am a Leo with an Aries moon. So I've always tend to push myself really hard. And I've been in so many healing crises because of it. And then finally in my 50s, I'm like, okay, enough. Ease and grace, right in perfect timing,
Yeah.
align with my highest good. So the more I call that in as a mantra, and the more it actually seeps into my everyday life.
Yeah. We're healing from within the pushing and forcing and letting that go.
That too, that's a
Yeah.
program inside of us as well, for sure.
Yeah. Well, what is coming up in your business? What can anything that you want to invite people to? And we'll include links as well.
Thank you. So right now, actually, things are a little slow in regarding to, my public awareness. I'm getting ready to start this quantum somatic awakening program for advanced alumni. That's coming up in 2 weeks. However, I do have some interesting things coming up. Um, probably the easiest way for people to find out about these things is to get on my newsletter list and just to keep abreast of my website. But I have a big event I'm going to be a part of through Portals to Ascension during the Christmas holiday. I forget the exact name of it, but it's going to be all about Jesus, and it's going to have Christ consciousness, and it's going to have incredible other speakers on there, myself, Marguerite Riglioso, and many, many others who are incredible and very famous in their own right. And then in the spring, I'm going to do my big 3-day event I do on a yearly level called the Homecoming. And that is an event, it's an online workshop retreat that I offer at a discounted rate to have people come in and to experience somatic awakening and to really get a taste of that for themselves so that they can move into their next level of homecoming inside. And then the next big 7-month somatic awakening immersion is going to be happening probably May of next year. But I have a lot of other things that I'm doing, constantly writing and recording things. I have a YouTube channel, and actually, for those who are Magdalene priestesses or devotees, so to speak, I actually during the feast day of Magdalene, I created a 5-day video series that's on YouTube that really brings you through not only connecting with Magdalene, but connecting with the energy of love and healing and transformation that she offers. So that's on my YouTube channel.
Amazing. I'm going to be listening to those.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
It was a real joy creating them.
Yeah. Well, any last words before I close this call with a prayer?
Well, I just want to say thank you for the invitation. It feels so beautiful to sit here with another Magdalene priestess and drop so deeply into this vibration. And, my sense of it, what keeps on coming back again and again and again. This is something I just recently wrote in my, like a really short Facebook post. And it's this, that love, divine love, God's love is so immense that as we surrender to it and all the different levels that is right for us as we move forward in our life, that it has the ability to take us home. So don't discount love. A lot of times people say love, and we only have one word for love in the English language, but the love of the divine is incredibly healing, incredibly transformative, and has the ability to transform anything inside of us that says otherwise, that says that we're not good enough, or says that we can't do it, or says that, something terrible is going to happen around the corner, whatever it is. As we allow that love in more and more and more, our lives are transformed. So we become that divine.
Let's bring that into our hearts. For all of you listening, if there's any challenge that you're facing in your life, any ways that you're doubting yourself, any ways you just don't know how to move forward or what to choose or what's next, just invite in that love, that spaciousness, that ability to slow down and to align with the power of the word, that highest and best good, to offer our will to a will greater than us, divine will. You can just feel the love in our hearts to connect, to reunite, to feel that union, to feel every step guided on our path. Just bring my hands to my heart with so much gratitude for all of this wisdom that Melissa has shared with us today. May it carry with us through our days. Blessed be.
Blessed be.